we've seen where the GBA Castlevania games ended, and for the most part, they ended on a pretty great note. Aria of Sorrow was about as good as you can hope to get on a system that was essentially a portable Super Nintendo. But what about how it started on this system? Was it a good start? Was it a rough start? Did they learn anything from the last Game Boy games that came out before this? How much of an influence would Symphony of the Night be? At the time, I'm sure people were wondering this. Wish I could say I was wondering too, but for as much as I really like Castlevania now, as a kid, I barely gave it the time of day. Back when this game was being released, I saw bits and pieces of it from various gaming magazines, although if you guessed Nintendo Power, you'd be 100% correct. I didn't really have any other way of getting information about games back then. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were certainly some gaming magazines that I read, Electronic Gaming Monthly, PC Gamer, PlayStation Magazine, so on, so forth. In my head, however, getting news straight from the source was kind of the way to go. Look, young me was trying his best, alright? He didn't get biased as a concept just yet. Well, you might be asking, what about the internet then? Well, that sweet sound of a 56K modem wasn't exactly super widespread around 2001 and earlier. Getting on the internet was sort of like a small event. You had to beat other people to the punch if you wanted to use that family computer for really much of anything, and even then you'd have to wait for an eternity to even get online at all. But I digress. The point is, I didn't really have much of a history with this game, much like some of the other Castlevanias on the Game Boy Advance. Now, you see, I was busy with my Game Boy Color and N64 at the time. Between Pokemon Silver, the best one, and no, I will not be hearing otherwise, Smash 64, and not to mention the 2 Zelda games, hint hint, some PlayStation every now and again when I was hanging with some friends or just, some family member that happened to have one. Oh, and of course the Sega Dreamcast. I was nearly overburdened with things to play. It's crazy to think just how much was popping off back then. Plus, I mean, the PlayStation 2 was a thing, GameCube was on the horizon, and then there was something called, I don't know, Xbox and Halo? The early 2000s were certainly a wild time. For all intents and purposes, I'm jumping into this game with little to no personal history, no nostalgia or rose-tinted glasses here. Just a guy, a game, a controller, and some very cursory knowledge. It's been over 2 decades since its release, and it bears noting that this game has almost nothing to do with the series head at the time, Koji Igarashi. In fact, it was handled by a whole different development team in Konami. Can they deliver to a fan of the series like myself after all this time? Well, let's find out. So here we go. My name is Leon, and this is a Castlevania Circle of the Moon retrospective.
From this day on, the Belmont clan will hunt the night!
Alright, so here's an interesting thing to think about. This game is non-canon, or it was at one point, and then it got brought back into the timeline, only to kind of be pushed off to the side again. I took a bit of time to figure out what the general consensus is with this game, and oh man, Depending on where you look, some people have some things to say. But let's move past that fan theory type stuff, yeah? The game itself gives us a solid year, 1830, which is great. However, it also suggests that something went down in 1820, just based off the timeline of events leading directly into this one. Okay, so that means Dracula was dealt with by a group of hunters, the Baldwins, and Graves clans. Where are the Belmonts? I don't know. This is supposedly around the time that all the other organizations, like the Order of Ecclesia, were popping up. And since that game doesn't exactly give an exact year of its events, people often try to slip Circle of the Moon in there, somewhere. The problem with that, however, is the hard dates set by Circle of the Moon itself. For these events to take place when they do in Circle, that would mean that Ecclesia would happen way later in the 1800s. But that can't be, just due to the state of the world as it's presented and the in-game text that talks about the missing Belmont family as something that has somewhat recently happened according to Ecclesia's lore. So long story short, it's a mess. The best thing that can happen here is that this game, and maybe even some others that exist in the series, take place in an alternate history, which is what I think most people have come to as the ultimate conclusion. That said, for an alternate take on what could happen around this time frame, Circle of the Moon holds its own. At least it has stayed somewhat relevant to the series as a whole, unlike, well, Castlevania Legends, which, well, I mean, that's too bad for Sonya. She never really got a fair shake, you know? Yeah, that Castlevania timeline isn't as clear-cut as you think it would be, but let's save that for another time. For now, though, and I can't believe I'm just realizing this as I write it out, think of it like you would the Zelda timeline, complete with that little outside of time classification they just kind of gave Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, or something like that anyway. Jeez, man, I feel like Doc Brown talking about timelines and alternate histories, or Marty, look at the graph, Marty. Speaking of things that never really pushed forward in the series, let's talk about the DSS, or Dual Setup System. This is, as the name suggests, a system in which you set up a set of cards. Why cards? I don't know, man. Good question. My guess is they wanted something akin to tarot cards to fit in with the occult and or, general spooky vibes that Castlevania likes to surround itself with. It's all about that aesthetic, These cards will empower you in some interesting and unique ways. You get 10 action cards and 10 attribute cards. The 10 action cards are based off of the Roman gods, mostly. You have Mercury. This affects the whip and its abilities, giving you elemental attacks, ranging from fire and ice to stone and plants, plus, a couple extra things like poison and electricity. Venus gives stat boosts based on the attribute card used. You'll be getting some decent mileage out of that luck boost, the strength boost, and the map completion boosts, especially as you enter late game. Jupiter, which allows for a bunch of barriers and, most importantly, self-healing. Mars, which offers more attack options infused with elemental attributes. I'm talking things like fire swords, ice swords, plant swords, giant hammers, tonfas, hand-to-hand martial arts, if you want to live that monk lifestyle, katanas, long swords, and gun. That last one takes a bit of time to fire though, so use at your own risk. The Diana card fires on projectiles alongside your whip attack and can also enhance the little spinny move used in certain combos. Apollo allows for tossing elemental projectiles, or bombs, I guess. You need to input a basic Street Fighter style attack motion for these to work at all. Otherwise, you'll activate the DSS and do everything but what you need to do and wonder what the point of this card is. I had no idea what you had to do for this one until I looked it up, because I tried just about everything I could think of. And you might be asking, well, why didn't you do the input command? Well, mostly because the game doesn't tell you to do this. Each card's description is incredibly vague. So the Apollo card, when you inspect it, and really this applies to all the other cards as well, is Apollo, god of the sun, music, and prophecy, has the potential to create explosives. At no point in that brief explanation does it even hint at doing a command input. To add even more frustration, when you select something like this, if the effect isn't immediate, you'll activate that DSS and drain all of your mana and possibly still have no idea what that combo does, which is a great segue into Neptune. Neptune has all defensive attributes, all of which require you to take damage to even identify. But not only do you need to get hit, you need a hit that will match your attribute card. So let's say you do Neptune plus Salamander. This means that you'll take no damage from fire-based attacks. But in order to even understand that, you'll need to get hit with fire to trigger it, which is crazy because you almost never want to get hit at all. So why? To use these combos effectively, you'll need to know well in advance that this is even a thing and then match it up to whatever enemy you might be facing in that moment. It's brutal and not at all required. You'd be better off with almost any other set of combo cards outside of Neptune. The Saturn card allows for little familiars to come down and help you out if you need that little extra support. These are pretty fun and in the right hands could be super useful. That said, I didn't really get a whole lot of use out of them personally. Uranus, much like Apollo, requires you to do that button command to activate. When you do though, you're going to get some pretty cool summons to crush whatever might be on screen. Thunderbird is especially powerful. Lastly, there's Pluto, which allows you to alter Nathan from moving fast, which is honestly just the best, to allowing for item crashes and straight up turning you into a skeleton. This card combo is extra fun to play around with, but you won't get these cards until much later in the game, so yeah. While we're here though, this game has some sticking points. Now this was a launch title for the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, that's right. Alongside Mario was Nathan Graves. He was there well before even Link and Zelda hit the system. So I'm willing to throw them just a little bit of a bone here. The game's controls take a bit of time to get used to. It's almost like they took the stiff classic Castlevania controls and had them do some kind of fusion dance with the Symphony of the Night style movement. And in doing that, you end up with Circle of the Moon. Nathan has that old Belmont strut. His jumps are heavy and don't really carry momentum all that well. He can't run, not until you find some boots at least, and once you get them, you're gonna have to double tap a direction to, well, run. Also, for whatever reason, there's no backdash. The Game Boy Advance didn't have a whole lot of buttons, but man, that missing backdash really hurts. It definitely doesn't help with the stiff controls. Honestly, this might be my biggest gripe with how this game handles. Anyway, this can cause some odd and honestly kinda unfair control problems in boss fights, and even when facing certain basic monsters. The clunky and stiff movement will cause you to eat attacks that you could have easily avoided if this game just didn't feel so heavy. However, if you go into the game expecting it to play like a more classic 2D Vania, then you'll likely be alright. I had to make that shift in my own head. After coming off of some of the more fluid entries in the series, playing this was a bit of a shock. That said, once you get into the groove of it all, you likely won't notice or really even care that much. Along with all of that are the level ups and Nathan's stats as a whole. Unlike most of the other games, you might have to take some time to level up and grind out certain items, both consumables and equipment. There's no shop to be found in this castle, which means healing and mitigating your damage is key. Some of these monsters and bosses will require you to be strong, like really strong. Personally, I had to take about 2 hours of in-game playtime to just level up and grind out equipment. If you don't, then certain bosses will probably feel like massive roadblocks. That said, everyone has their own playstyle, but mine involved getting to a point where my MP would regen faster than what I was using, for a nearly constant maxed out attack stat. To round things out, hearts were used again for the base hunter weapons, your holy water, the cross, axes, throwing knives, and the stopwatch. There's one secret sub-weapon, but more on that and how to go about unlocking it just a bit later. How you play is up to you. Just, be warned is all I'm saying. Hey there, I'm going to start talking about the story stuff here in a bit, so before getting into that, and, what I thought about it, I would appreciate it if you did all the stuff that YouTube likes to see, subscribe if you haven't, like the video, leave some of your own thoughts down below, all that stuff, yeah? Alright, this one's pretty brief, so let's just jump right back into the action. We got a whole castle to explore and a Dracula to defeat. As per usual, we open up with a text crawl and we find out that this story takes place in 1830, not at the titular Castlevania, but just some kind of regular castle in Hungary, which may or may not belong to Camilla here. The opening shows Morris Baldwin, his son Hugh, and Nathan Graves confront Camilla and Dracula right after he had been revived. Drac lays down some smack talk about how old Morris has gotten since the last time they saw each other. He then blows a hole in the floor, causing Nathan and Hugh to fall a long way down, and it takes Morris away for some kind of ritual. Nathan then takes a second to check on himself and Hugh to see if, he's fine. Turns out somehow they're both good to go, which is good, right? Time for a team up. Except not. Hugh pulls a super dick move, calls Nathan all but useless, and tells him to go home. Nathan takes a bit of an offense to that, kicks around some bones like a kid who got called lame by somebody else, and right off the rip, we're setting up for Hugh to be the rival character, which is something that we've seen in a few other Castlevania games at this point. What's new and pretty interesting is the starting point of this game, though. With very few exceptions, the first starting area of a Castlevania is typically the drawbridge or maybe castle entrance. So to start out in more or less the dead center of the map and then fall into the catacombs below is, well, that's cool. I like that. It's different. Right away, once you gain control, you'll notice those stiff controls that I was mentioning. Nothing too bad right now, so, it's cool. Just lots of downward progression. You'll also very likely find your first set of DSS cards, Mercury and Salamander. Those will help out a bit as you continue to explore down here. Depending on how stubborn you are, though, you can get a few levels and maybe some equipment from the monsters that you encounter. Along with that, eventually you're going to find the dash boots, which, well, they let you run. So that's awesome. We're making some good headway here. The catacombs are a fairly linear area, but what you will find if you decide to go off the beaten path even just a little are some upgrades. Health, mana, and hearts. These are just about everywhere, and I highly recommend looking for these even if they are kinda out of your way because, the bosses. The bosses are tough. Not like Order of Ecclesia tough, though. That difficulty is partly because of how damage scales in that game. No, these bosses are tough because you will be fighting them and the controls at the same time. And, man, that's a hell of a combo to take on for sure. In the more classic style of Castlevania, with some notable exceptions, most, if not all of the enemies are beatable because the game is crafted around your movement and how the enemy patterns are made. This first boss, Cerberus, was a slap in the face. I had a tough time, and I'm not bad at these kinds of games. They are, in fact, some of my favorites, but I was still playing this game like the others in the GBA trilogy. Meaning I was going at it as if it were a traditional Egavania. This was a mistake, one that I found myself falling into over and over again as I got deeper into this game. Alright, so whatever, man. First boss kind of smacked me around a little bit. It's no big deal. They can't all be like that, right? About that, you're just gonna have to wait and see. I got lost, which you would think is a decent thing to deal with, yeah? The critical path the game wants you to take seems pretty clear, especially because many of those paths you can go down are blocked by, blocks. Two types of blocks, in fact. Gray, craggly ones and red wooden box-looking things. So, being experienced in this, I went in the direction that I could with my run and double jump actions. This wasn't too bad. It allowed me to get a handful more DSS cards, some equipment, level ups, and those upgrades. Most conventional monsters were going down in a few whip cracks, and things were looking pretty good. However, the Necromancer boss. You'll get some more story details when you first encounter him. I thought, because I hadn't played this game before, that he was just death in disguise, but no. No, it turns out this is just some other giant robed skeleton dude. He informs us that Master Baldwin is going to be sacrificed for Dracula and that they're only waiting for the full moon. Now, this might just be the version that I'm playing on, being the advanced collection, but that moon doesn't exactly look like it's going to be full anytime soon. They got a couple nice jagged edges, let's say, in the moon there from what I saw. Anyway, this guy is another slap to the face. I tried every combo of DSS cards that I had, and for the most part, they did nothing to help me in terms of damage output. Fire, ice, earth, plant, none of them really did much to boost damage. It was around this point I was starting to feel like I wasn't really doing something right. but I couldn't place it. After fumbling my way through that fight, I got the tackle ability, and now I can take out those gray blocks. Finally, I can explore a little bit more and have a nice extra little movement option. Though a dash, it certainly is not. You can use the tackle to hit some monsters, but I don't know that I would recommend doing that. It does decent damage, but if it doesn't kill the monster outright, well, you're gonna get the hurt in return, so it's not really worth it. After beating the boss, Nathan asks the important question of where our buddy Hugh is, and, well, since he's asking an empty room, we don't really get much of an answer. Back to the grind. The next major area is a mechanical tower. A sort of stand-in for the clock tower, I guess, that exists in the other games. Along the way, I got my second action card, Jupiter. I didn't really know how to use it, and just kind of stuck to my whip elementals. It was also in this area that I found some spots that required some sort of wall jump or maybe a high jump upgrade, along with some monsters that started hitting pretty hard. These heat shades and the fox archers were everywhere, and to make things worse, so were these thunder demons. They really brought the pain. I was starting to find out that many of the fodder monsters were giving me some trouble. In terms of levels, at this point I was kind of in the low 10s and eventually reaching about level 15 once everything was said and done. I'm not sure if that's high or low for this area, it's just where I was at. The boss at the top of this mechanical tower is a golem, and it's a pretty nasty one at that. It hits like a truck and can cause gears to rain from the ceiling, plus it has the ability to heal itself. The amount it heals isn't really a lot, it caps out at 5, but it does trigger about 10 to 12-ish times in rapid succession, which honestly is a ton of health to recover when you're only dealing about 11 damage per whip like I was. Eventually, I started firing off some sub-weapons, and that holy water was putting in some work. It helped to close out the gap in the damage that I was missing, and it also kind of negated a bit of the healing that the golem was doing. So, okay, maybe the thing that I was missing was just not utilizing all of my kit to beat these bosses. That seems reasonable. The golem went down fairly easily once I started to, actually do that. And after beating this thing, Hugh finally shows up and kind of seems a bit angry that Nathan is still just kind of hanging around. For whatever reason, Hugh seems caught up in the glory of combating the darkness that exists in this castle. He then dips out and, well, it's back to business as usual for us, only now we can wall jump. The kick boots let us use the action button to jump off of walls. You can really only go wall to wall with these things, like in some of the other Metroid games that exist. It is technically possible to get a decent single wall hop if you can manage it, but you gotta know a couple movement techs, and that use case is somewhat limited. It was around here that I was once again finding myself to be lost. I was able to get some additional upgrades and whatnot, so that was good, but I couldn't really remember where all the wall jump spots were. It was during all this exploring that I got my hands on the Venus card, and this card would become my best friend in this playthrough. It gave boosts to all the stats that mattered. Bonus 25% damage, bonus 25% luck for grinding out item drops. It was everything I needed it to be and more. Venus card quickly became my default for just about everything moving around the castle. The only problem was how much MP it was draining. I wasn't able to sustain myself and keep it going for all that long, and MP regen as a whole was a forever long ordeal. I figured it was something that could be made up for in leveling up, so it wasn't something that I troubled myself that much with. I just needed to explore the game and everything should sort of sort itself out, I'm sure. After exhausting every possible place I could go, and after an inordinate amount of time, no, don't bother looking at the time clock there, I finally found the one spot that the game intends for you to climb with the wall jumps, and I enter the Eternal Corridor. There isn't a whole lot to do here, so, I just explore, get upgrades, the usual. The corridor eventually gives way to the chapel tower, and stuff is hitting hard again. But because of the near constant buff that I have going, I feel like I'm kinda keeping pace. It's just a matter of trying to dodge and figuring out when best to attack. I felt like I was kinda getting into the groove, figuring out what the game was asking of me. Things were going pretty well. It was still high tension, because everything was hitting hard and the controls weren't exactly making things easy, but I was getting more accustomed to them, which is great. More DSS cards and equipment, things are coming up. Millhouse. Getting into the bell tower area of this chapel, the monsters got buff. I'm talking, they're jacked to the nines, man. The werepanther and these werebears in particular were rough. Nothing too bad, though. They just hit like freight trains. Thankfully, their attacks are pretty well telegraphed. The boss room is right around the corner, and whoa, Hugh gets sent flying right on out of there. And he's none too happy to see you. Claims that this monster is his trophy. Nathan ignores this and just kind of walks right in there. This guy, this damn boss. Adramelk? Well, whatever. This is where everything for me kind of hits the fan. I thought I was doing well. I thought I was doing good damage. I thought everything was coming up Millhouse, but I forgot one crucial factor. Nobody likes Millhouse. I had the hardest time with this boss. My sub-weapon was wrong, my whip didn't do all that much damage, and this guy spawns bubbles from the floor that you will run into, and he summons skulls that kind of go from hand to hand in an arc. Lastly, you'll have to dodge aimed, or at least generally aimed, fireball shots. Thankfully, the boss itself doesn't move, but it wasn't until after I beat this guy where I learned the best thing to do is just kind of pick a side and stick with it. But this encounter, finally hit me with the seed of thought. I'm gonna have to grind out some levels. But that one stubborn part of my mind kept that thought from fully forming. I was still determined to just play it out because in my head, my dumb gamer brain, all I could think was skill issue. Oh, how wrong that was. How utterly defeated I would be in just a few short minutes. I'll get to that. But for now, we have a bit of dialogue to see. Hugh is big mad that you beat this creature and says the only reason it was possible was because of that hunter's whip. That Morris only gave Nathan the whip because of the shared family history. Hugh wins every training match after all, so obviously he should have had the whip. Hugh is an ass, just straight up. He leaves and, well, okay, I guess it's time to move on. Stepping on a switch blows up these giant Iron Maiden looking things, and you'd be forgiven if you thought it was just that one, but no, this switch blows up all of these. And I know there are more than a few of them around the map. It won't take long until you end up finding the underground gallery. This place, I learned quickly, loves its poison status effect, and bees! These killer bees are obnoxious. They fly into you, and on their own they do decent damage, but they also apply poison. My health was being drained rather quickly. Luckily, this area isn't all that large, so it wasn't too bad. Before long, I found the boss. The dragon zombies. Yes, zombies. As in, there are 2 of these things. And man, I just couldn't survive this boss fight. The arena is awkward. The main platform to fight these dragons on can be easily reached on both sides by the dragons' heads. Rubble falls from the ceiling. Even the necks of these dragons cause damage. I found myself fighting them and the controls, much like with Adramelk. That feeling was back. Full force. It was becoming increasingly obvious. I could deny it no longer. It was grind time. Thankfully, the Advanced Collection gives very helpful information, more so than the game does by itself, and I found out that there were a pair of poison armors right below the boss room. Not only do they give decent experience, but they also drop an armor upgrade, a robe that boosts intelligence, and it just happened to be better than my current armor in terms of defense, so my objective was twofold: grind out some levels and try to get this armor. I was currently at level 24 and getting bodied. Let's see where I end up. Man, I wish it was actually that fast. What was only a couple seconds for you was almost 2 hours for me. To be fair, though, I did leave the game on and counting while I stepped away, but still, 13 levels later, and I think the stat improvements speak for itself. At 720 int, my MP regens faster than it can be drained while using a flat 25% buff for my strength, plus I can keep that on for future item grinding, as it uses the same MP cost when using the Luck Boost DSS. The map percentage damage boost is still too much for my MP to cover, but it does drain slower overall, and who knows, those precious seconds could count for something. Point is, with these improvements in the stats, thanks to a bit of grind and some new equipment, I should be in good shape. Just kidding. Wouldn't that have just been the worst? Jokes aside, the dragon zombies still put up quite a fight, but I finally felt like I was on equal footing, maybe a bit stronger than I needed to be, but, better safe than sorry. I learned that a defeated dragon becomes food for the other, and that was kind of messed up. An interesting, cool detail, but messed up all the same. A few well-placed whips and axes, and they both finally go down, and for my effort, the heavy ring, I can finally move those red boxes. Getting out of here was way easier than getting in. Those extra 13 levels that I grinded out really did me some huge favors. The cleanup in this area was also quick. On to the next part. To my surprise, some areas of the castle had upgraded monsters. I figured it would be easy street when going back to earlier parts of the castle, but turns out not so much. Things more or less scale with you, and that's something that I hadn't really seen up until now. It was kind of cool, to be honest. As with any Metroidvania, I did a bit of backtracking to see what I could grab, and barring a few spots that still needed certain abilities that I didn't have yet, I was able to clean up most of what I could get into. I eventually found my way to the underground warehouse. This is where I needed to be to make proper progress. Honestly, there wasn't a whole lot down here. A few new monster types and some upgrades, but nothing too crazy. Lots of box puzzles though, for some reason. One spot in particular would become very important. However, I'll fill you in on that when the time is right. For now though, keep that in mind, and it's deeper into the warehouse we go. Until death. Say it with me now. There's no dialogue or much of anything. Death is just down here for some reason, and as far as death fights go, this one's alright. He even has a second phase, which is cool to see. Death went down easily enough though, and I don't think it's because I was too strong or anything. I was only really level 39. I must finally just have a handle on what this game is wanting from the player. Beating death will give you the purifying amulet, which will let you enter the waterways without taking damage from, the water. So off I went. More monster upgrades in the castle. Nice. It's changing alongside with each boss defeated. That's an interesting thing to see. Entering the waterway and touching the water will cause it to purify. Who would have guessed? I didn't know that was going to happen, so when everything froze up for a bit, I thought something went wrong. Thankfully though, not the case. It had been a minute since I've saved, so all good. It was odd, just wasn't really prepared for that. Same for these switches. I didn't know at first that they lowered and raised these chemical plant zone looking platforms here. The waterway was an odd area. The platform puzzle wasn't too tough to navigate, but the monsters and all the ice caused some problems. Honestly, in hindsight, I probably should have used that defense boost DSS combo, but I was just too focused on leveling and trying to get drops. A new robe from these witches here and some bracers from these frozen shades. Oh, plus a couple new DSS cards. Those are always important. After getting past all the water, we find Camilla. After a bit of back and forth, Camilla lets it slip that Hugh was, quote, more honest with himself. And because of that, he fell under Dracula's control. She transforms into this, and oh man, this design is crazy. She came a long way from just a mask in Castlevania 2. This fight gave me a bit of trouble, mostly because I didn't have the right sub-weapon. I hold on to that holy water maybe a bit too hard. Camilla's final words echo the necromancers from the start of the game. The rite is ready. Just waiting for the full moon. Yeah. I heard it all already. Camilla then dissolves away and we pick up the rock wing. This gives us the last tool we need to explore everywhere in the castle. A super jump. There isn't much to do now except fill out the map and maybe, if you're feeling it, claim a few more items in the process. Now, assuming that you're all caught up for the most part, there are a couple things that you could do at this point. Option 1 is you could just beeline straight for the last few fights and call it good. Or you can take a bit of time to engage in side objectives like the battle arena and or finding the last handful of DSS cards. The battle arena has a few things going on, including having certain monsters that have 2 of the last 4 cards. So, yeah, the battle arena is a fun and interesting little side quest that makes you rely upon just raw character damage. You can't use DSS in there. Well, not really, anyway. The area zeroes out your MP in a matter of seconds. You can technically still cast off one of the summons if you refill your MP and hit that button combo as soon as you exit out of the menus, but that's easier said than done in some cases. Honestly, the best bet is to just grind out a couple more levels and try to equip yourself to have as high of an attack stat as physically possible. And to do that, let me introduce you to Lilith. You see, back in the warehouse area, there was this hidden hallway, one that you might have entered already for a health pickup. If you come back here after taking out Camilla, you will find the super monster Lilith, and she hands out an impressive 20,000 XP per defeat. The problem is, she hits like a truck, and even with a high attack stat, buffed or otherwise, she has insane defense. At my level, with my loadout, and using the map percentage attack buff, I was only hitting for about 66 damage per whip. So there I was, level 44 and barely keeping pace with this fight. I did a ton of off-screen grinding, honestly maybe too much. By the end of it all, I was level 59, and that's a 15 level increase. And, as a bonus, I had managed to get the best robe in the game from her, the Sage robe. My MP regen was through the roof, and my other stats honestly weren't too far behind. Everything was looking pretty good. Fat lot of luck that did for me though, because the MP drain in the battle arena, the robe more or less amounted to nothing. That said, if you have the right armor, it really wouldn't matter anyway. You can buff up your attack stat and probably just skirt through pretty easily. The battle arena houses some pumped up versions of monsters that you can find out in the world. Some of them aren't all that bad, but a few can give you a run for your money, even in the higher levels like I was. Make sure you stock up on restorative items, potions, meats, anything that will give you some healing. The last 3 rooms have some monsters that have the last 2 action DSS cards. Those 2 providing some of the more interesting interactions with the DSS system, and one of them being supremely goofy, but it is fun. So it's worth trying to grind them out. It's made infinitely easy in the Advanced Collection. You can either reload a save state or just rewind a little bit and take out that monster again. Doing that seems to reset the RNG, so it's an easy enough grind if you're doing it that way. If you're playing on OG hardware, well, there really isn't much you can do. You can run the whole thing again, or you can slide outside after beating the last encounter just enough to re-enter the last room and work your way backwards. But honestly, those are kind of your only options. Your prize for doing all this? Well, besides the DSS cards, you get the best armor in the game with defense and attack power in mind. It'll tank your intelligence, but you might not really need that much anymore. But, that's up to player preference, So with that done, there are really only a few things remaining for side objectives. I went to find the last 2 action DSS cards. These come from Trick Candles and Scary Candles. They essentially are the same thing, but they are in different areas of the map. The very first boss room has the Trick Candle, and the drop rates for these cards are terrible. We're talking 0.4%. The Scary Candle really isn't much better at 0.6%. The only saving grace there is that there are 2 of them in this room as opposed to just 1, so cool, I guess. But I end up getting them anyway, and with that, my DSS card collection is 100% completed. Yay. Time to throw some bones. But you gotta run out and fall apart. Finally, with all of that done and out of the way, all that really remains is heading to the throne room. In here, we face down against Hugh, and it's honestly about goddamn time. This guy's been nothing short of a sore loser the entire time. The fight, actually, pretty fun. A hunter versus another hunter. Minus the range that you have from the whip, this fight is fairly even in terms of what each of you can do. Hugh has no problems tossing sub-weapons and spells at you. The only downside is that he lacks some range because of the sword that he uses. However, even that can change as he uses his special attacks. It's a pretty even and decent fight. Nathan realizes that Hugh is being controlled by Dracula, because of course, and upon his defeat, Hugh gets freed from that control. Accepting that Nathan has a more pure soul than he does, Hugh was jealous, and that led to this constant antagonistic behavior, up until he got some sense smacked into him, that is. Getting the last key that you can get in the room behind the fight with Hugh will take you to the real final area, which, much like the intro of this game, takes place in the center of the map. Again, it's a solid change and sort of mirrors Symphony of the Night in that way, though honestly not as directly as Harmony of Dissonance does. Dracula has some new attacks here. He still teleports around, but he launches bats and some electric kind of ball attack. I'm not sure what that is. It's more engaging than the triple fireball and, well, giant fireball that he usually uses in every other game. That said, he does have a second phase, and this one is wild. Symphony of the Night had a crazy final design for Dracula, but this one takes that same energy and kind of goes in a different direction with it. Now he's some kind of giant kaiju looking thing. This form is really only vulnerable in his giant stomach eye, and he deals a ton of damage. He has some of the most unique attack animations a final form has had up until now. The final moments of this fight, though, do get a bit, I don't know, weak. He does this dash attack a few times, and it does hit hard, but after that he turns into just a floating eyeball with a bunch of bats kind of circling around him, and that's kind of it. It's nothing terribly fun. It's a neat idea on paper, but I feel like they could have maybe done something more with a desperation style kind of ending from him, you know? Anyway, after dealing the final blow, Nathan and Dracula exchange some words, and then as per usual, when a Castlevania game comes to a close, the three heroes, Nathan, Hugh, and Morris, stand on the side of a nearby cliff or forest or wherever they turn out to be and watch as the castle crumbles. Nathan and Hugh vow to continue their little rivalry, and that more or less ends the game. On a narrative level, honestly, this isn't all that bad. I mean, it's certainly not anything groundbreaking, but it fits in with every other Castlevania basically ever, which just about describes this game as a whole. For not being an EGA-made EGAvania, it carries a lot of that same EGA energy. This is probably why it bounces between being canon or not. I've heard and seen some things about how EGA doesn't really like this game all that much, but it fits in with the rest of the game so well that it might as well just be another Castlevania, you know? The music is all around really good. The way it looks is solid. Nathan has a unique look to him, as does every other character, really. The only real complaint is that a bunch of the human-sized things are really tiny. Like, Nathan is super small on screen. I couldn't imagine trying to play this on original hardware. The original GBA not being backlit, I mean, unless you were lucky enough to have that Game Boy Advance SP. Otherwise, you got that worm light, you know what I'm talking about? So trying to play this in low light areas must have been an experience. If you played it on the Game Boy Advance player, though, nice. You did it correctly. Well, minus the awkward GameCube D-pad. That thing was awesome. There were definitely some growing pains for sure. Things that future titles would, fix, for better or for worse. As far as what I think this game brings, well, I'm going to give it credit for being an EGAvania, minus EGA being involved at all, so that's some bonus points in this game's favor. I know I just kind of mentioned it, but I like the way that this game looks and sounds. The music in this game is surprisingly good, like way better than it has any right to be. Now, it's not perfect, I won't be singing its praises too loudly. The grind, at least for me, was crazy. I don't think I did anything wrong, per se, but man, it sure felt like it. I felt terribly weak at just about every boss fight that I did until I decided to buckle down and grind. Gaining those extra levels, the total combined being about 20-ish maybe even 30. Things were so much easier after that. Is that maybe a skill issue, like my dumb gamer brain thought? I don't know, maybe, but that's how I chose to approach this. I also don't think I fully figured out the DSS system, which is honestly a shame. I think that system has a bunch of potential if someone would take the time to, expand on it. Speaking of, a hot swap setup like Shanoa had with her glyph sleeve would have been boss as hell. Hot swapping between buffs and damage abilities on the fly? Ooh, even if it was similar to Juiced, it would have solved a ton of menuing fatigue. But hey, they more or less figured this out in later installments. Oh, on the topic of how you play, this game doesn't have your almost standard second or additional modes, like Richter or Julius mode. Instead, when you beat this game, you get a password to use as your player name. After beating the game once, you get Fireball, and that lets you play as a magician, kinda, and gives you every DSS card right off the rip. You also get a boosted intelligence stat, so MP regen is heavily boosted, and it gains more points per level up than all of your other stats, which means you can focus on equipment for your attack power and defense. So that's pretty neat. Beat this, and you'll get another gameplay name, Gradius. This password unlocks the fighter mode. This takes away all of the DSS, which means you don't need to worry about MP at all. Instead, you get a hyper boosted attack stat, and you can play the game almost like a classic Castlevania. This is super cool. Beat the mode again and you'll unlock Shooter, using Crossbow as the name. This gives you a whole bunch of extra hearts and new sub-weapons, i.e. the homing knife. The other stats get hit kinda hard, so beating this mode requires you to play smart and use your sub-weapons over pretty much everything else. That double heart DSS comes in clutch here. So that's extra cool, and you would think that it ends there, but beating Shooter mode unlocks the last extra mode, Thief mode. Using the name Dagger, this gives you an insane luck stat. The idea being that you take out monsters and use the drops as a means to keep yourself in the fight. Super interesting and way different than pretty much every other Castlevania extra mode that existed up till now. And even since. Now, for as fun as all these modes are, there's one kind of big problem. You have to play the whole game each time. I wish you could just unlock all the modes at once, and then, you have the option to try whatever one you want to play next. The whole play one to unlock the other is cool, but if you want to unlock them all, you're going to be playing this game for a long time. Which, honestly, really isn't a bad thing. You just really have to like Circle of the Moon. But, yeah, that's kind of it, I guess. To answer the question at the top, was this a good start? Yeah, I think so. It's the best start Castlevania could have had at the time, and the fact that it was a launch title to boot, I'm going to give them credit for being willing and able to put a vampire hunter on the front lines like that. They would improve as they made more games for the Game Boy Advance, no doubt, but this is a good game and a great start for the Game Boy Advance trilogy. Hey there everyone, thanks again for sticking with me on this detour into Castlevania. The next time I enter this neck of the woods, it'll be time to talk Symphony, Rondo, and Dracula X. So prepare yourself for those if you're interested. In the meantime, if you want more castles and whips, check out these videos here. Or, if you'd rather something fresh, here's something YouTube thinks that you might like. Check them out and I'll see you around. Keep it clean.